And if we just take the amount, like 30 million each Swedish crowns, it's not that big. But can you just elaborate a bit more? What was the part of the Swedish spring budget, so to speak, from the government? What was it again?
Well, so the parts of the spring budget, I totally understand that they have to focus on. There's a lot of, warfare, security, other aspects to consider in the spring budget. Yeah. So I totally understand that, maybe AI cannot be, AI is part of everything now, but, AI cannot be sort of the full focus of the spring budget. But I'm still really disappointed because, out of the AI commissions, hundreds and hundreds of pages and sort of really brave suggestions, they picked two, which are not even actually building AI solutions. It's what we Swedes love, sort of doing some sort of assessment of what we could do and how to do it. So let's talk about how we could do it instead of let's just get to it.
So the only, the money that was awarded, so to speak, in the spring budget was not even to build something, it's just for another investigation?
Exactly, more or less. So something that was expected was that Skatteverket and Försäkringskassan, I have to sort of...
tax authority and the
Swedish tax authority, agency and the Swedish social insurance agency, they got 30 million each in the spring budget to build a joint AI workshop. And I thought that meant, actually helping, especially sort of public organizations to build AI prototypes. But apparently it's more of a workshop for elaborating and sort of assessing how it could be done. And like, how could a centralized, a sort of public AI agency or motor work?
So it's not even a workshop in terms of building a prototype. It's simply just to investigate how it potentially could be done.
Yeah.
And that's the only money that was...
At least that's what I sort of read between the lines or in the lines. And then EMU, the Data Protection Agency, got, I don't know how much money, but a certain sum to build or enable a regulatory sandbox to support both public and private companies and organizations in feeling safe in sort of building their first AI prototype. So again, a centralized, I guess, centralized support in understanding the AI Act, which is really complicated, can be really complicated. So that's good, but still, again, it's not actually building and making things happen.
That's a bit sad. It's good that it got some money at least, but compared to the report from the AI Commission, right, it's not at all what they were asking for.
No. And it's also good that it's a combination of at least trying to make things happen, but also the sort of ethical regulatory parts of it as well.
I heard someone say it really nicely before. Let me see if I can recall it. But, you can think about the opportunity cost. What happens if you do not invest in AI? And a lot of people say, we couldn't build this and that. But someone phrased it, I think, even better. And it was for healthcare. And they said something like, okay, if we invest this much and compared to that much, how many lives are getting lost because we didn't invest that much? So, turning it around and saying, if we actually could become more productive and improve quality in administration for the healthcare services, we could actually save a lot of life and have the nurses actually performing patient care instead of, working on whatever kind of strange system they have to work with, right?
Yeah. And the funny thing is, or funny, but Erik Slottner, the minister who's responsible for these matters, he actually emphasized how many sort of millions, if you still want to talk about the money aspect, the sort of the numbers, because some people want to talk about the numbers. He's sort of very aware of how much more, how much of the Swedish BNP could be increased if we actually put an effort into building AI solutions, etc., and sort of how much the Swedish economy would be boosted. And he still doesn't, he still only sort of
You can wonder why that is. I mean, if you take the biggest companies in the world, we know they invest heavily in AI, and they do that for a single purpose, I would say. It's simply because they will make more money and sell their business better if they do it. And if you look at the latest investment, like Stargate in US with $500 billion, it's like the whole GDP of Sweden, more or less, investing in that. So, people are investing heavily.
I know, but they have bigger muscles as well. I mean, they have the technology, they have the enormous budgets that we don't have. My guess is that Erik Slottner is probably much more keen on advancing AI than, can be seen in the spring budget. But he's probably not 100% prioritized due to, wars and everything else that's going on. So it's hard times to get your ideas through as well as a minister, is my guess.
One can understand you have to invest a lot in the defense industry right now.
Yeah.
And I guess AI, is not a super popular topic from a politician point of view to talk about, right? It's kind of hard to build an opinion around. Or what do you think?
You mean in general or AI in warfare?
If someone were to put on their upcoming election in Sweden AI as a top priority in something, I don't think anyone would do it, because even if they may believe it could provide a lot of value, it's not something you build popularity from.
I know. You have to do it in the right way, I guess, and sort of understand the worries that people have. That's one thing that I always consider when I talk about AI, that regardless of audience, even if it's, leaders within this big company, we're all individuals, human beings. We're all more or less worried about the future of AI, and understanding that, and understanding, the worry that people have when it comes to AI and our kids and schools and AI companions and everything. You have to understand the worries as well. So I definitely understand that it's easier for a politician to talk about sort of regulating AI and the worries with AI. But I know that there are positive stories that you can tell, especially the type of stories that you just told. What could we do with the help of AI? Like, how many women could be saved? Right. Breast cancer, ovary cancer. AI can do a lot and save so many women if we use AI, and we are. I mean, Sweden is in the forefront when it comes to using AI to prevent cancer. So, talk about the positive stories more.
Sounds awesome.
But that requires politicians who are visionary,
Right.
And I don't,
and perhaps a bit brave as well.
Exactly. Yeah. And without becoming sort of partipolitisk, talking about specific sort of parties, I think we lack, right now in Sweden, we lack visionary politicians who are brave.
Here. Couldn't agree with you more. With that, I'd love to welcome you here.
Thank
Paulina,
you.
Let's see if I can pronounce your last name. Modlitba?
Yeah. Yeah, the hard part is pronouncing it just the way it's spelled. Modlitba.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's how you should pronounce it. Okay, good. Awesome. But you're a rather famous, I would say, AI expert. You're a keynote speaker, and also are writing a book that I'm looking forward to hear more about shortly. And have been, also a frequent appearances in Swedish television. Yep. And I think a lot of people recognize your expertise and knowledge in AI. So that's with great pleasure to have you here. So very welcome here.
Thank you.
But perhaps first, could you just describe a bit more? Who is really Paulina? What's your background? How did you get interested in AI?
Born and raised tech nerd. I was born this way, to quote Lady Gaga. My dad was interested in technology. He was self-taught. I mean, he didn't have any education within tech, but he got a PC. He worked at a Swedish public agency, CSN. And through that agency, he actually got a PC really early. We had this PC program. You could buy a subsidized PC and bring it home. And he did. And so I started playing games on that PC. And eventually I started coding, and I discovered the internet and fell in love with everything. It was just like a perfect match.
So this was in the 90s or something? Or?
Well, yes, thank you. It was more, I was born in 1980, so perfect timing to actually discover all of these things. I probably started discovering computers when I was like, 8, 9, end of the 80s. And just loved it. But I was, equally interested in philosophy, in history, in, all of these topics. And I was very sort of brådmogen. I think I aged backwards.
What do you mean age backwards?
Well, I was born an old person, wise person who preferred to hang out with grown-ups and talk about philosophy. I mean, but I loved MacGyver, Inspector Gadget. I loved the Ninja Turtles and April especially. So I wanted to be like a combination of something with tech and robots, but also a journalist. I loved writing, and I couldn't really put these things together in my head. Like, what does that mean? Like, what type of job actually allows you to combine these things? Yeah. But I really didn't really care, and I enjoyed it. Yeah.
Then you got some education, and how do you get into? Perhaps you can speak. Just you have also some education from MIT, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, so the interesting thing is this usually happens with girls, especially because research show that girls who are tech interested are usually interdisciplinary, or like me, interested in many different things, whereas guys who are interested in tech are usually more sort of nerdy into just tech. So identifying with KTH, sort of studying technology is easy peasy. But for me, I was super nerdy and I love tech. But for me, considering KTH here in Stockholm, the Royal Institute of Technology, was like, no, I've seen these nerdy people in overalls, and that's not me. I'm interested in fashion as well. So I started considering other schools like Handelshögskolan here in Stockholm, economics, finance, but I felt lost. And then luckily, a friend of mine recommended, like, they just started this new interdisciplinary program at KTH in media technology. And I just looked at the brochure and I, saw them listing like design, journalism, but also mechanics, physics, programming. And I just fell in love, and I kept falling in love for 5 years. And at the end of that program, it's a long story. I sent an email to a professor at the MIT Media Lab, and I actually got accepted and stayed at the Media Lab for 3 years and did even more hands-on research and worked as a research assistant. I never actually got a PhD, but I now have 2 masters in media technology. Awesome. And sort of my focus has always been on the intersection of sort of humans and robots, or humans and technology, and and society.
Awesome. How do you get into AI then? What's your first impressions of that?
So I don't think I understood that it was called AI, but at the Media Lab, definitely, because Marvin Minsky, one of the godfathers, I don't even know if I like that title, but it's being used broadly. He founded the first AI center at MIT, and he was a friend of the Media Labs. He loved to hang out and play piano at our Christmas parties, and some of my friends who were students at the Media Lab, they actually were students collaborated with him in research projects. So he was there a lot, and so I heard about his work. But back then, this was 2005. We were in the midst of an AI winter. Right. So we didn't really know that on the West Coast, obviously, Google and these companies were already breaking, starting these projects that would become the breakthrough projects for the AI that we're using now in deep learning and everything. But for us, we were in the middle of an AI winter. And so I was sort of admiring Marvin Minsky and the rest of the AI people, but we also view them as a bit, delusional, because they had all these ideas of what AI could be and could do, but they hadn't really figured out how to actually do it in real life. And so, that's sort of, the first encounter I had. Eventually, I got involved in a research project with a super cool woman called Rana El-Kalyoubi. Okay. She's a well-known name in the US. She has her own AI pod now. She finished when I got to the Media Lab, she had just finished her PhD in Cambridge, I think, or Oxford, and joined the Media Lab for a postdoc. And she did research on how AI and facial recognition could be used to support children with severe autism in reading other people's facial expressions, faces and facial expressions. And I got to be her research assistant. So really? That's the first time I got hands-on experience of actually using sensors, data, and to a certain extent apply AI to it. And she eventually, long after I was gone, commercialized that product, not targeting group individuals with autism, but sort of using facial recognition and to understand how people react to commercials and stuff like that. So a more commercial use. Yeah.
Awesome. And then you moved into, you also have your own company or companies, perhaps?
Yeah,
today?
no, just one.
Just one, okay.
Which is not, it's not a scalable business, or I'm not, at least not trying to scale it. I am, to a certain extent, scaling it now with the help of generative AI. Maybe we can get back to that. But it's a one-woman consultancy. Yeah. So
we should be friends, right?
Yeah, we should be friends. Yes. I founded it 11 years ago. And after working in both large corporations in the media industry, but also tech startups for a couple of years. And then, started my own business. And I've been, doing that since.
Awesome. Can you give some example? What do you do at your own company?
Oh, it's so hard to explain, but what I guess the easiest way to explain it is I'm a futurist. So I look into I analyze trends, I look for signals, and I try to prepare for them, and I package that knowledge. I'm still just as curious as I was as a 5-year-old, and I ask questions, and I read, and I listen to podcasts, and I just gather all this information. I package it in very different ways, in many different ways. So I have a newsletter with almost 5,000 subscribers. Nice. I think 220 paying subscribers with insights, and then I also package that as talks, as courses, AI courses.
What's the name of the newsletter, by the way?
It's a Substack, so I think I haven't done packaging branding that well, to be honest. I think it's called Pausplings Transspaning or something. Yeah. So I started out with having an bilingual one, so a Swedish one that I with the help of AI translated into an English one. But it turned out to be, the translation was still so bad that I ended spending like 8 more hours to actually find the right language and tonality in English. And it wasn't just like, I couldn't actually find the English audience. So I decided to focus on the Swedish one to start with, and put all my energy into that. So courses, talks, I moderate a lot of conferences. I like meeting people and sort of using my knowledge and sharing it in order to make people more excited about the future and also make it more tangible, just like where's the actual value in this? Yes. And how should we prepare, and what's the mindset? So people mostly pay for my energy and my sort of, I guess, to some extent positive.
And your expertise, I think.
Yeah, and my expertise, yeah.
Yes, awesome. You actually recently were at this event in Rigoletto as well.
Yeah.
Can you just describe a bit more? The name was AI Unlocked, right?
Yeah, we tried out this, but Per Klingfeld, my friend and former sort of colleague or one of my clients, he actually wanted to try out a half-day event for people who don't have, people are busy. Maybe you don't have time for a 1-day or 2-day conference, but a half a day with focus on both sort of theory and trying out things. So an actual workshop on your phone to make it as accessible and easy as possible. So, and he asked me and 2 others, David Fendrich and Amer Mohammed, 2 amazing guys. They have a podcast together, to talk. And then Per had a 1.5-hour workshop, just next level, beyond the most obvious prompts. And settings, the memory settings, and using projects in ChatGPT, how to sort of level the way you use these chatbots.
How to use the chatbots.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of people are still sort of figuring that out and love to get hands-on examples of what you can do.
And you do need to train it, right? I mean, some people think, how hard can it be? You just prompt it and it works, but it's not really the case, right? If you want to do it properly.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so it was a set of AI experts there at the AI Unlocked, and you had a workshop. You went through, how to work with AI different ways.
Yeah, so my scope was slightly different to what I usually have. So I usually have this sort of humanist overall perspective on AI and why we should consider it more of an opportunity than a threat. Those type of things. But also, like, this is what you can use AI for if you want to use it to for innovation, business development, get out of your box. How will it change the way we lead companies, the way we work with each other, stuff like that. But this time, Pat actually asked me to, because I was a moderator as well, to open up with more sort of paint the picture of hur mår AI i Sverige, so AI in Sweden.
Because current state of AI in Sweden.
Exactly, because we know that we're hesitating and we're lagging behind so much. Why is that? And what stats do we have? And, do we have any do I have any ideas of how to actually...
What is the current state of AI in Sweden?
Oh, it's sad. No, so... It is actually positive in the sense that more and more people are using AI. So both if you look at sort of on an individual level, we're at least 1/3 of all Swedes are using it regularly. And within businesses, we've gone from maybe 10% of businesses using it to 25% or more. So there is an increase, and a pretty obvious one, but I think only 3% are actually trusting AI platforms and the way that they use our data and sort of the decisions that it makes based on the data it has. And, so we're keen in somewhere. We definitely want to use AI and we see the benefits, but we don't trust it. And Swedes are, we are probably, I think, the company or the country within EU that has made the most sort of detailed, bokstavstrogen is a word we have in Swedish. So like, interpretation of the data protection law, for example. Right. So we do everything right. We're like Germans, we read the regulations and we follow them and all of them. And I think that goes for AI as well. We want to be certain that, this is an American company. Is it really okay for us to use,
very careful and want to do
very careful. And we want to be proven we want to see proof before we actually try it out. We don't take risks. So that's what's mainly holding us back.
So you would say Sweden is not as good as other companies in Europe and I guess US and other parts of the world as well in finding value from AI, or what's your assessment?
No,
there?
Because we haven't gotten there yet. You have to try it out. You have to get past building prototypes to actually find the value and see it hands-on. That's my background from the MIT Media Lab. Learning by doing is definitely something that I still preach.
Yeah. That rings so many bells for me as well. Perfect. I love you saying that. Cool. Any other highlights from the event that you'd like to share from the AI Unlocked event?
I'd like David Fendish. He had this really provocative title for his talk, AI Sucks. And he was sort of, he and Amr, they're like this duo, I guess, where Amr is very positive and emphasizes sort of the positive aspects of AI, whereas David, he's been like you working with AI for, the last 25 years. He's a little bit more realistic when it comes to what AI can do and not do. So he had this amazing talk about sort of, what are the limits of AI? And I think it's just as important to understand that and not just overhype AI and see it as either something very dangerous or something like a superpower that can do everything and can solve all your problems in a day, but to understand what the limits are. And he did it in a great and very humorous way.
Awesome. And so well said statement.
Yeah.
We really need to understand what AI is good at what humans are good at, which
Exactly.
usually are different things.
Yeah.
Right? So.
And I don't even know what the English word is for this, but de-dramatized it, dramatisera the whole topic of AI, and sort of making fun of it to make it less threatening, I guess. So,
yeah. Oh, that sounds awesome. And speaking about AI sex, I love the title of your upcoming book here, right?
Can you actually say it in the podcast, or will there be like a beep?
No way. It's no problem. So we can say it easily. But
I can curse.
What's the title of you're working right now on a book, right?
Yes.
And can you just share, what's the title going to be?
So in Swedish, it's Vad fan ska vi med AI till? And I wasn't even sure what the English version was, but in our emails, what title did it get? What the fuck do we need AI for?
What the hell do we need AI for?
Yeah.
Yes. I think it's awesome. I love it.
Yeah. There are several parts to it. It just came to me, and number one is it just came to me, and number two is obviously I want to stand out. There are so many AI books now, and I don't want to be just like, one of many AI books. But also it really symbolizes who I am, being a little bit more edgy and not being too worried about being, even if I'm, meeting top leaders within a company, CEOs, CFOs, etc. I'm always me, and I wanted the book to reflect that.
Nice.
I want people to take my knowledge, my experience, my expertise seriously, but other things are, I'm just a human being, and
Paulina, what the hell do we need AI for?
Nothing. Nothing really.
I don't think you believe that. Okay, but please.
Yeah. As with many other things, I'm very much in between. So I'm definitely not one of those evangelists who are like, we need AI no matter what. Like, just use as much AI as we can, put it implement it everywhere, and the big blessing. I'm not religious when it comes to AI. I definitely think we have to be more aware of why, and I think sort of the state of AI technology right now and the effect that it has on climate change and our planet, and sort of we have to become smarter for many different reasons in when we use AI and not, and why we use it and not, etc. But when there's a reason, when it's motivated to use AI, it really can do amazing things. Whenever I feel like, oh my God, why am I doing this again? I always sort of go back to reading what Google DeepMind, for example, is doing in not only advancing, everything that, everything that we know about the human body, and research that will be so important when it comes to developing new medicines and understanding our bodies better, but also making that data available to everyone and sort of open source. I'm a big fan of open source and making knowledge and data and insights available so that people can continue that path of sort of advancing that research and applying it to completely new areas as well, not just medicine or proteins or whatever. So
I guess you're referring to the AlphaFold, the amazing thing they did there,
and the Nobel Prize, and I'm super happy about that. So what do we need? What the hell do we need AI for? We definitely need it to get us as humans out of some of the really hard problems that we put ourselves in. So the climate change, we need AI there too, to sort of simulate catastrophes and understand like what changes actually have an effect on the planet, and what type of effects does it have.
I can recommend a site. It's called climatechange.ai, and they list a lot of use cases where AI can help fighting climate change. So there's so many use cases there as well. Right.
So to help us survive and thrive, and a lot of challenges are due to the fact that there are so many of us right now. So pandemic spreading quicker because there are billions and billions of us. using AI for that. And cancer, we get older, we get more sick due to that. So we need it for a lot of things, but there are beautiful things in our everyday lives that we can use AI for too. And that's sort of more what I focus on in the book. And the main reason...
What do you mean? You focus more on, in the book on what?
Stuff that, you know, you and I might, well, the everyday person may not be thinking about sort of how protein folds. So that type of AI research might not make a huge difference in their daily lives. But I want to focus on the use cases and show the positive aspects of AI that actually does affect people here and now.
So everyday activities in some way, and how AI can help with that?
I focus mostly on sort of the business person in you. So it's a lot sort of around business development, innovation, but I also start the book with actually showing that it can be used for and is being used for preventing suicide in the subway here in Stockholm right now.
Really?
Yeah. And that it's, again, my favorite example with breast cancer, because women have struggled with being taken seriously within healthcare for so many years, and now suddenly their AI is actually advancing healthcare for women, which excites me a lot. And so these type of use cases, and actually arbetsplatsolyckor as well. So accidents.
At the workplace.
Workplace accidents that you can use AI to analyze patterns and prevent them. So those are the type of
What the hell do we not need AI for? I guess there are. I mean, I think you phrase it well, saying, some people believe AI can be used for anything, and you can just use ChatGPT to solve whatever problem there is. And I think that's wrong. And it seems like you say the same here. So are there some things that AI should not be used for potentially?
That's a great question. I just realized, I should have had dedicated a chapter in my book to that very question, like to actually set the limits for what AI should be used for and not. Well, so you probably noticed that a lot of people, I think this is interesting, a lot of people have used generative AI to make action figures of themselves and Studio Ghibli sort of characters of different photos, and I'm not saying we shouldn't use AI for that. I'm pretty liberal, but considering how much energy it consumes and sort of, it's not the top priority. But I think it's super important for people to explore their creative side too. So I'm not, I'm divided. Yeah. I sort of, one more clear answer, one more sort of specific thing that we definitely shouldn't use it for. As with many things, women are often the target of the backside of many of these developments. So 99% of all sort of sexual deepfakes, porn deepfakes, have women as sort of victims or targets or objects. So it's 99% is like some of these models. I saw an example. There's this deepfake generator that actually this female journalist tried to generate a nude pic of a man and was told, unfortunately, I can't do this. I haven't been trained on enough male data, enough pictures of male naked bodies, which says everything, Yeah, that's strange. So it's, AI is being misused a lot when it comes to these things. That's obviously the backside of everything.
Yeah. So many negative aspects, and I guess warfare and cyber attacks, and if you want to develop a new virus or coronavirus or something, there's so many examples of horrible things AI could be used for.
Yeah, almost all positive examples have a negative sort of Jekyll and Hyde kind of dynamics to it, I guess.
Yeah. I saw this. I think it was a paper in Nature a couple of years ago, and they spoke about the UN. Development goals. They have defined like 17 goals, and for each of those they have like 165 targets that they want to measure, and they try to see how AI potentially is contributing to reaching those goals or actually hindering reaching those goals. I don't recall exactly the numbers now, but I think it was like in 70% of the cases it actually was a positive contribution, and in some cases for all the data centers that we're seeing being built now, they actually consume so much energy, so in some sense they actually not contributing to a more sustainable society. So there are pros and cons, but in general, more positive. Is that your view as well? That
Yeah, it's definitely net positive, I would say, right? Yeah. And especially with, the factors, again, climate stuff that we won't be able to solve without the help of AI. It's too extensive, it's too complicated. We can get so much help from AI in understanding our problems and sort of simulate solutions before we actually try them out. And yep.
Yeah, and I know you're interested in philosophy, and so am I. So, the ending part of this podcast, we go more philosophical.
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear your thoughts about that.
Bring it.
Perhaps I'd just like to hear, you also are appearing a lot in national Swedish media, etc. Yeah. So I'd just like to hear a bit more about, what's your experience of that? Any challenges or how do you think, when you appear on TV4 or similar kind of channels to just be as valuable as you can, so to speak?
I would say there are probably two things, at least, that I consider. One is that it's a huge responsibility to talk about AI to a public. Yeah, I'm in Nyhetsmorgon, so just anyone, my mom, friends, somebody's grandma is watching. It's a huge responsibility to talk about AI, especially, people have different experiences of AI. They have different knowledge levels. And I'm still a bit upset when it comes to Max Tegmark's summer talk, Sommarprat. Yes, back in 2023.
And perhaps we just need to give some background to understand it a bit.
So those of you who are not Swedish, in Sweden, we have this really sacred tradition where we let celebrities, some more sort of famous than others, talk for an hour or an hour and a half with music, and so one person per day between June and August. So it's a summer thing, and people love to just lie in the grass in a couch and listen. And sip a glass of wine or whatever they do. And so 2 years ago, Max Tegmark spoke, I think, for the third time. And, whenever I usually start my talks, I sort of open my talks with referencing to his summer talk, because he had just lost his mother, and his dad was already dead. And so I think it's super important to consider the fact that even the most knowledgeable sort of AI godfathers or experts are people, human beings. Yes. And I think somehow that sort of phase in his life where he's suddenly sort of dödlig, he's actually getting closer to the end of his life. Yeah. He had this really, really dark view on AI.
Dystopian view.
Yeah, about sort of AI taking over during his lifetime, and, we better prepare for it. Yeah. And I think, just dropping that, just saying that in public radio.
Exactly. Would you? I think he said something like, he don't believe that his son or child will survive because of AI will kill the world in some way. Mm. Would that be? I guess you don't like to say that in public, like radio, you wouldn't do the same, right?
No, I wouldn't. Even if I believe that, I don't. But even if I believe that, I wouldn't say it like that, because it's. I would want to make sure that people have enough knowledge about AI to make their own decisions and sort of filter whatever I say. I would definitely give them the context of where I come from. That's why I love the fact that you actually asked me about sort of what's your background? How did you actually fall in love with AI? What's your take on AI? Because my truths about AI are, filtered or colored by, that story.
Yes.
And so we have to understand Max Tegmark to understand why he talks about AI in this way. And I think it's, it made me upset.
Way to speak on media. So you don't speak like that. So,
no.
So do you have any, way to think about how to speak about AI then in media that is, your preferred way?
I tend to talk like 30% what the problems are. So I definitely don't want to be naive either. I want people to be aware of the fact that, the dark side, the flip side of the coin, so to speak. But mostly like 70% maybe positive and 30% the challenges. And I think that mix is usually good. And most people leave my talks with a net positive feeling around AI. And the most important part, learning by doing. I can't stress enough how important I think it is to actually get your hands dirty, to de-dramatize the whole thing. If you try these tools out, if you learn, again, AI sucks in what ways, and sort of allow yourself to laugh a bit at how stupid AI can be sometimes, but also the powers for you and the value, it suddenly becomes something much less scary and much more positive. And so I keep talking about against, like agency is super important. I want everyone to feel agency and the fact that it's not too late. You can actually shape the future of AI. It's, you don't have to be Max Tegmark to shape that future. You can do it.
Yeah, I mean, given how old I am as well, and I've seen AI being even stupider than it is today.
But you're not that old. You're not Marvin Minsky old.
No,
he's dead now.
Okay, but still, I get surprised, every time saying, okay, AI can do this, and I'm super positive. I know, it makes mistakes sometimes, but I'm still super surprised how well it works. And so many other people are so angry that AI can't do X and Y and Z. So they are instead, negative, saying, I thought AI can do everything, and then they become, disappointed a bit.
And that bar is so low. So I still hear people say, like, I Googled myself and it didn't know when I was born. It got the wrong city, and that's when I decided to not use AI anymore. And I'm like, oh, it's not perfect, but it's perfect enough or good enough. Yeah.
And I think in media as well, it's, AI have a tendency to be portrayed very, very negatively in general, especially in news articles that are being written. It seems like they always want to find an angle that is, focusing on the negative and potential abuse part. So I guess in your case, you're trying to balance that a bit and not be as
But I also understand that it sells the negative stories, and that's why many of the AI prophets or AI gurus or godfathers tell these dystopic stories, because if you build worry in society around the topic of AI, you are the person that they will turn to when they need comfort and better stories. Like, oh my God, we're going to die, are we? Can you tell us? So it's a way for these AI experts to build an ecosystem where they're needed and their truth about AI is needed. And I just don't work that way. Well, if anything, I want to be needed with solutions, because I contribute with solutions, but not the worrying part. I think it's unethical.
Well, awesome. I congratulate and thank you so much for taking that kind of stance and speaking about AI in a balanced and positive way, which so many people and media outlets are not doing otherwise. So great. I also know, Paulina, that you work a lot in different type of advisory roles for companies and different decision makers. How would you phrase, if you were to look at the challenges that different companies have in finding value from AI, what are the main challenges you would say for that? It's a big question, I know, but still. It's
definitely something that I talk about in my courses, but also in my book. So I should know the answer to my answer to that. It's usually that you either start too big or too small, but not in between. So you either have top leadership that thinks, AI can solve everything. Let's do AI. Everyone has to do AI. And you don't really have a plan for what that means. And if it's actually creating value, and if it's actually sort of tied to your strategy and your business proposal, so it's just like, let's do AI. And usually it can become, you start out too tech-oriented as well, and like let's collaborate with this big AI company that provides this platform, and that will solve everything for us. And then it turns out you don't have the data for it to actually find the value in your data. It's definitely the wrong place to start. Or you start small. You're too afraid. You don't want to use your own data because it's not safe enough. You want to do a prototype. You want to try out a sandbox, a workshop, and you're happy with that. And that's sort of you don't actually have a long-term plan for how to scale that, how to make it come alive. Well, yeah, what's your long-term plan? And you're content with your prototype and being innovative, but that's not good enough. So I've seen both, and not that many companies that thrive in the middle and actually.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, because that's one of my core messages as well. I see so many companies that may be able to build a prototype. They may even use their own data potentially, and they see, it could potentially work, it seems to provide some value, but they don't understand the complexity of actually putting it in production and building a real product out of this, where it starts to make proper value, which is probably 100x more work than actually building the prototype itself.
Yeah. And I don't want to sound like a business consultant, with sort of, you have to tie it to your actual business proposal, and it's a people matter as well, but it is, and that's the truth. So not understanding the change, the mental human change that goes into this, and the change of, the mindset that has to shift. That's probably a big mistake as well, that, you can't just press a let's go AI button and expect everyone to go, yay, this is amazing. You have to. I heard somewhere, I think futurist Ian Baycraft, I heard him at South by Southwest a couple months ago. He usually keynotes every year at South by, and he had this slide about sort of companies need to invest just as much in education and the human sort of transformation as they do in tech. So look at your tech budget, double that, some more, and that's your people budget, because it's, especially when it comes to AI, it takes a lot.
So it's not sufficient with the tech, right? So the change management and getting the business to actually start adopting it and making use on board it on it and upskilling and everything takes a lot.
Exactly.
Yeah. Some people say, it's about, the tech is around 30-40%, and the change management and the people work is about 60-70%. Would that be accurate, you think, or?
Yeah, but I don't want people to take the tech part to sort of easy as well. Well, what do you say? Like lightly as well.
No.
It is important to get it to work properly. It is important to sort of, one thing that we're really bad at is sort of, especially when it comes to the public sector, we have all this data in Sweden, but we constantly fail to collaborate with our data. We don't want to share it. We're really protective. And so, again, sounding like a guy in finance or sort of McKinsey consultant. Sorry, McKinsey, but, actually doing your data work, your infrastructure work, making sure that all your data, that you have your data lake and everything is sort of synced, and is so important too. And I think that's why I don't want to say like it's, tech is 20 and human aspect is 80. It's probably more like 50-50, I'd say.
I'm so glad to hear you say that. It's so easy to say it's just about the people, but in reality, going from prototype to product is actually very complicated.
Yeah, and especially I meet startups, and I advise startups as well. And when you build your whole sort of business or your idea on a certain data set or a certain AI application on some type of data, I've seen many startups actually failing because they realize like they don't have the data set that they need. They can't buy it from anyone else. It's not good enough. And so the whole idea fails because of that. So especially, if you're a big organization with a lot of sort of different data sets, you're not as vulnerable. But if you're a smaller company building your business on a certain type of data, you better do, the data part is probably even more important.
Right. And speaking about data, there's a lot of challenges there. Just, I met a lot of companies say, we have so much data, it's not a problem. Yep. And then in reality, if you just want to organize it and clean it up and have it in a state where you can start using it is surprisingly difficult. And so many fail simply at that. But then we also have the regulatory aspect of this. And a lot of people or companies are super afraid about both GDPR and AI Act and potential, personally identifiable information that they can get sued for. What do you think about how big is the impact of regulatory fear, if you call it that?
In Sweden, it's huge.
Yes.
Again, because we take it super seriously.
Yeah.
So I would say it's really sort of stifling innovation and progress. Yep.
Yeah, agreed. And in some sense, I think so many people think you're not even allowed to use personal information, but you are. You just have to be compliant, and you have to do it, right? So I mean,
and I think I'm definitely not. I think it's stupid to the extent that there are ways to build secure solutions, and to a certain extent, I just think we use it as an excuse because we don't want to do it. It's easier to say no than to say, yeah, let's look into this and do our homework and see how we could solve this in a secure way, compliant way. So I think that's the problem in Sweden, that it's so much easier for us to lean towards, I don't know, so I say no, rather than I don't know, so I'll look into it. I
don't know, well said. And I remember there was a law professor in Uppsala, I believe, who said it really well. This was in 2018 when GDPR was just launched, and she said, I mean, in reality, it's not the problem of being compliant. The problem is that people don't know how to be compliant. So it's the uncertainty of the regulation that caused the problem, not actually the regulation, if people just knew how to do it, right?
Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
Yes. And I see that all the time. I have different clients within the public sector, for example, and they all they've all made different interpretations of whether they can use American platforms or not, sort of. And so the question is, why is Stockholm Stad using Zoom for their meetings, whereas this agency that I also have as a client, they're using Skype, which is soon to be obsolete. It's not even being used anymore. But that's the only platform that they have considered safe enough. So that's why I'm super glad. I know I make fun of the different sort of sandboxes and the small spring budget, sort of the small AI budget in the spring budget, but I'm glad that they're looking into centralizing interpretation, because this is my interpretation of what the sort of regulatory sandbox will be doing, to actually centralize the interpretation of the AI Act, and so that it takes so much time, and it's so unnecessary and stupid to have every agency, organization within the public sector do their own interpretation and look into all these documents. It's just stupid. So we definitely have to be more efficient and centralized when it comes to that.
But how do you do it? I mean, I remember, I've spoken to a lot of legal people and professional lawyers, and you have to respect their role as well. That they are basically responsible for making sure that they are not, breaking any laws when using whatever data they have, etc. And of course, they have to be in some ways safe rather than sorry, to some extent.
Yeah.
But at least I heard some lawyers say it really well. She said actually, we have to first recognize that laws like GDPR and AI Act are always a level of risk. It's not a question of being 100% safe. No one can ever be 100% safe. Even if you do the best kind of compliance work, everything documented, all the kind of risk analysis done, you still can get sued. So the question is rather, it's risk management.
Yep.
What is the proper level of risk that you're willing to take, and how can we minimize it, of course, but still there is no way that we can be 100% safe, because then we have to throw away all the data and basically turn off internet and whatnot. Yep. Is that, I think that's a healthy kind of thinking, right?
Yeah, and the EU AI Act has been designed based on sort of different risk levels. So I don't know if you're sort of how much know about it, and it's definitely not my area of expertise either. But I have a short chapter about it in my book, because you have to.
About the AI Act specifically? Or?
Well, yeah, and the risk pyramid.
Yes.
And I really like the idea, the fact that different companies, different organizations are judged differently depending on how much risk risk is involved in what they do. So companies that are handling sensitive data tied to specific individuals or, members of society should be judged harder and sort of regulated harder. So I really like that, the idea of that triangle and sort of applying different regulatory frameworks to different type of organizations and companies. And
But we have spoken about the AI Act a number of times on this podcast, and let me try out an idea on you and see what you think about it. But okay, it's risk level based, so the regulatory burden, so to speak, it depends on the potential risk or of harm it can cause, which in itself, I guess, is a good thing, right?
Yeah.
So for most, as they claim, activities of using AI, it's actually low risk or no risk, and basically then there is very little work you have to do. And then for other things, like if you want to manipulate human thought or something that's high risk, and it should be regulated a bit or much harder, or even forbidden.
Exactly.
Right. So the question then is, I think I saw an early version of the AI Act, and they spoke about chatbots specifically. And they took the whole technique, they just categorized as a single chatbot thing and said, chatbots are low risk, I think they said, in this case.
Yeah, it is.
But then you think, okay, is it really the chatbot as a technique that should be categorized in a level, or is it the application? If you just take chatbots, then you can use it for like customer service.
Yep.
Okay, the harm level there is super low, right? But then if you use a chatbot as a therapist for children, and suicidal children, perhaps, that is very, very high risk. So I think it's very dangerous when you try to use techniques like a chatbot or even AI in extreme, and then have a separate law based on a technique instead of the use case.
Yeah, definitely. The sort of EU Act shouldn't be tech-centric either. Like nothing should be tech-centric when it comes to AI. It's the purpose. It's sort of the risks that are tied to it. I totally agree.
Yeah. And then they claim in the AI Act to be use case centric, but I think when you actually read it, it is not.
Yeah.
It's very tech focused. So,
and I think it's interesting. So again, my sort of area of expertise is not the regulations of AI, even though I'm interested in it and try to stay up to date. But in one of my AI courses, I have guest lecturer, Emily Terlinder, she's an AI lawyer, basically working with the AI Act on a daily basis, and she says that for the first time, in a completely different way to when the GDPR was introduced, she's seeing a shift in mindset already happening. So people are actually in the EU Commission in Brussels are already reconsidering the AI Act because they can tell that it's been designed, with by people who don't understand this fully and might be sort of
you get stuck in this topic.
So it might change.
It is, right?
Yeah.
We actually spoke to a person in the AI commission, or had a talk with a person in the AI commission. And he got the question, what do you think we should do with the AI Act? And he said, we should deregulate it. And like, what? And I said, you're crazy. But he was a bit serious, actually. And he didn't mean remove it all, of course, but we need to potentially have a simplification of the regulation. And I see a lot of movement now in EU, and especially France, I think, is driving this a lot.
Yeah. Also because there are commercial interests in this, pushing, lobbying for that to happen. But one part that I do like, and a lot of people, I usually ask this when I give talks, if they know that this is, happening. One of the parts that was, because the EU AI Act is being implemented sort of incrementally, so bit by bit. And one of the first ones that was implemented like in the beginning of February is AI literacy. So any company that sort of high risk, low risk, everything in between, you have an obligation to actually make sure that everyone in your organizations have sort of fundamental AI knowledge, sort of a base of AI knowledge, I guess. And not that many people know that. And it's not, I usually try to explain it in the way that, it's not, you're not going to be fined. The EU is not sort of looking into and sort of doing inquiries to see if you have enough AI classes in your organization or if you educate people enough. But if there's an incident, something serious happens and they do an investigation into it, and it turns out that this happened because of the human factor and because people in your organization didn't know how AI works, then that's your responsibility, and that's a problem. So it's yeah,
super interesting. And cool. We can speak forever, I think, about regulation, and it may not be the most fun topic, but I think it's an important one, right?
It is.
Yeah.
It's time for AI News, brought to you by AI8W Podcast.
Cool. So we usually take this small break in the middle of the podcast to just speak about some recent news events that we've heard about.
Yep.
Do you have something, Paulina? I have some topic I'd like to talk about. Do you have something that you'd like to bring up?
I do, and I'm looking it up. It's an article in the New York Times. I have a newsletter, and I actually am sort of diving deeper into this article in the newsletter I'm sending out tomorrow to my subscribers. Kevin Roos, he has this podcast, Hard Fork, as well, that I love to keep updated with AI. He talks about the fact that he has noticed that now the discussion around AI is slightly shifting to sort of a post-AGI discussion, and whether, having AI models that are aware means that we should start considering how AI models actually feel, and, are they okay? And,
so care about the feelings of the AI system.
Exactly. And what type of rights? I mean, the talk around sort of the discussion about AI system having rights but also obligations is not new, but now it's really happening in sort of in this whole AGI or not era. And the reason why he wanted to write about this is because one of the biggest AI companies, Anthropic, they have Claude, for example, the chatbot Claude, actually hired a person. I can't remember what the title of his role is now, but a person who's solely responsible for sort of the welfare or the well-being of upcoming aware AI models. So, whereas we're talking about, so is AGI even possible? These companies are already preparing for it. Some of them probably already have an AGI-like model hiding somewhere, and that's why they have to prepare for it. But I think, it's a ethical topic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Anthropic is a very impressive company, I think. It has a lot of ex-OpenAI and Google people in it, and they are also...
Kyle Fish, AI welfare researcher. Yep.
Awesome. I mean, they really focus a lot on safety of AI, and they also have this awesome paper recently about tracing thoughts of AI, trying to understand how it actually works inside, and that they do reason in certain ways, different from humans, but still do reason in some ways. And I think they do a lot of really impressive research, and this is, I haven't read this, but it sounds really cool.
It's pretty interesting, and he also, of course, brings up the fact that it's slightly provocative, because we haven't really figured out how we develop AI systems that are for our welfare or our well-being, and sort of agreeing on that. So is it really sort of, should we focus and spend time and money on researching how our AI models thrive? But it's happening, obviously. So
you would think you would, primarily focus on the human safety, but I guess they do a lot of work on research on that as well. So.
Exactly. And I guess they go hand in hand to a certain extent. And there's this other research project that is mind-boggling, where a couple of researchers tested an AI model and told it to react emotionally more like a human while it's providing therapy to people who are sort of bouncing their problems or suicidal thoughts. And after these sessions, after a number of sessions, they asked the AI model, so how are you doing? Like compared to before these therapy sessions, how are you doing and what's your emotional state? Yeah. And they could actually discern that these AI models were feeling worse and actually sort of absorbing the negative energy and dark thoughts of the patients. So yeah, this is definitely something that we will hear more about. Provocative or not, we will hear more about it.
Do you feel sorry for AI systems today?
I do. And before starting this recording, we actually talked, you and I have my background in human-robot interaction. And part of my research was sort of realizing how little we need, how much sort of, it's really easy to build robots that are human enough or human-like enough to make us feel feelings and sort of empathy towards them. So one example is just this robotic trash can that ran around in a restaurant and picked up trash or asked people to throw their trash in it. And people are like, oh, this is, it's a pet. It's our friend. And so it's, I do too. I definitely do too. And like,
so you put human feelings.
I feel sorry for a lot of things, like, even like non-living things.
I can feel sorry for the car or my motorbike at some
when it's cold,
right?
or
I mean, it's a machine, but still you can get some kind of. But that's one thing. You can, as a human, get like emotional about machines.
Yeah.
But then the other point is, at some point, perhaps we should give it some kind of rights. I guess we're not there yet, or what do you think?
No, we're not there yet, but definitely it's, there are all these questions that need to be prepared for. Also like the whole workforce, sort of robots replacing or AI replacing humans, and the whole discussions around tax and who's creating value and who has to pay tax and not, but also rights, I guess, and robots having rights, yes. And it's such a multifaceted question with so many sort of entries into it. Yeah, it's complicated.
Human rights and machine rights. That's interesting topics for tomorrow.
Yeah.
I had perhaps a bit more technical news, but I think,
Yeah, go for it.
It's actually from ByteDance, so the TikTok company.
Mm-hmm.
And they released a new open source model called UI-TARS, I believe it was, and it's this kind of agentic model that actually have, I usually try to categorize these kind of three components. If you take like a car, you can think it has perception, can see the cameras and understand what's happening around it and build up this kind of vector space, as Elon Musk call it. But then you have some reasoning, some planning, how to work around to come up with the end result that you want to have. But also taking action. So in a car, it's very obvious, you can steer left and right or gas and brake. But in this case, for the UI-TARS, they also have these three components, which, by the way, are OpenAI's AGI 3 bottom layers. So they have these 5 levels of AGI. And the 3 bottom ones is basically the conversational knowledge part, and then reasoning and control. But this one is then focused on controlling the computer or the phone. So we've seen ChatGPT and others can have, the operator, which is basically a browser use, so it can control.
Isn't it pretty shitty though?
It is very shitty, and it's not even a prototype. It's very hard to use, but it's getting there.
Yep.
Obviously, humans are much better in taking actions currently, but we're trying to make AI have agentic capabilities.
Yeah, and I definitely don't want to be one of those who say no to agentic AI because it's shitty now. So exactly. Go ahead.
But it is shitty now. I agree. But this one actually works surprisingly well. So this one can take control. It can use your computer, and it can play games. For example, if you take Minecraft, it actually just takes screenshots and looks at the game in real time and controls the keyboard to take actions and be able to play the game, so to speak. And they played like 1,300 games and could use it for that. You could even ask it to, what's the example? Something like take these cells from Excel and put them into Word and make sure the format looks the same as it did in Excel.
That sounds like we definitely hit AGI if it's able to do that. Sounds impossible.
It does, right? But then it could actually, you can see it, opening Excel. This was actually in LibreCalc, the Linux version, but still similar to that. It opened the spreadsheets. It copied the cell by clicking on the different cells using the mouse, copied it over, and then tried to reformat it in Word, so to speak, so it looked the same, with a lot of clicks back and forth. And you can see the reasoning happening on the side, so you can see step by step, how it's reasoned and say, I must do that, etc. And then it could also, operate on a phone and things like that. I think, it's super interesting because it's an indication of where we're moving in some sense. Still, it's very shitty when it comes to agentic tasks. And of course, humans are much better, but we are getting better at it. And this one, of course, have awesome knowledge skills, but semi-good reasoning, and even worse, agentic action-taking abilities. But imagine a future still when this is 10x better.
Yep.
Imagine when it can actually control, not by having API integrating the applications that is manually written, it can use the human type of interface, which is keyboard and mouse, to interact between different applications that you have. That will be a big thing. Right?
Yeah.
Wouldn't you agree?
Well, yes and no. I think it's a middle stage or whatever you call it. Like, I think there's no real reason for AI systems to use our way. I mean, mouse and keyboards and everything. Again, my background is in UX and interface design, and that whole. It's so unnatural. It's such a stupid way of communicating with tech, and the whole idea and the whole strength with AI and generative AI is that we can use natural language or whatever it is, code in the background. So yes, to begin with, but then the real strength of agentic systems, if they can help us completely get rid of these stupid, old, outdated interfaces. And do things in completely new ways. And that's what I try to emphasize when I talk about AI too. Like, we're not just using AI to do whatever we're already doing faster. We can do things in completely new ways. And we have to talk about what those new ways are here and now and prepare for them. Yeah.
And that type of communication would be so much faster than having to use keyboard and mouse.
Yeah.
But still, in the meanwhile,
until
in
the meanwhile,
those exists, right?
For sure.
I think, a nice metaphor here is still the self-driving car. And today you have to have the cameras, it have to look around by seeing there are other cars and pedestrians and whatnot. But in the future, and some people call it like level 6. So level 5 is, the full autonomy without the wheel and completely operated by the AI. But level 6 could be actually when they start to talk to each other, without humans involved, and they simply can see that, oh, this car over there, I can speak to him. He can let me know, oh, there's a pothole over here that they've seen. And that type of communication can be so much more efficient than having to use the camera to do it. Right?
Or like, do you come here often? Flirting a bit? You're fine. Yeah. No.
Yeah. Awesome. Paulina, I would like to go a bit more into another topic, which is into investments.
Yeah.
And you're also an angel investor, and it's also an interesting topic for myself. So perhaps we can start simply thinking, when you are trying to look at AI startups, what do you look for? What is it that you think could be a good sign or really bad sign for the success of a company?
I would say that it's more complicated than ever, just because everything is changing so fast, and all the middle layers that you could invest in. I mean, the whole sort of software as a service, or like AI, whatever you call it. I don't even know what to call it, but the sort of service layer on top of different AI models is exploding. But just, tomorrow, one of the big actors, one of the big tech companies could sort of expand their AI models or introduce a new one that sort of just eats that business opportunity up
go vertical
in a second. And that sort of makes it more difficult than ever to actually understand which startups build long-term value and will be needed even like 5 years down the road. So I have to be honest, I think it's more difficult than ever to invest in AI startups.
But yeah, I've been killed by Google once, and it was in 2011.
You're not bitter?
Well, yeah, partly bitter.
Yeah.
I mean, if we just elaborate on that thought a bit more, and we know the big hyperscalers, they're building the foundational models that can do a lot of things, and then, at least according to Sam Altman, you can do so many more applications on top of it. But in reality, what is really stopping, if you get a successful shopping experience or whatnot, or travel business, or booking.com suddenly got eaten by Google flights or whatnot.
Yeah.
I mean, is that something? Okay, let me phrase it like that. I mean, either you can see it as a positive sign when a big hyperscaler go vertical into some field, because it basically it's validating that the business model that you had is useful. But then, and if they get an exit because they get acquired, that's a positive thing.
Yeah.
So wouldn't you as an investor, would you be really afraid about getting killed? I mean, it could also be something that you can get acquired by a hyperscaler in that way.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely the most interesting part to look into. Like which companies are building solutions that the bigger actors are looking into and are interested in acquiring. I think that's definitely one way to go. I'm also a firm believer, again, to get your hands dirty and actually try the services out, because I still think, AI being AI, it's still human, and the whole experience is still so important. And there are so many now, I'm being approached by so many startups now that are doing different types of vibe coding solutions, and they all say, but we're doing it better than those other guys or girls, and our sort of user experience is a lot better, and you can, our solution is a lot better at going from a really limited prompt to whatever it is that you want to achieve, and sort of makes everything easier. And yeah, there are so many options, and you really, my first answer is, well, I need a demo. You have to show it to me, and I have to experience it and sort of actually be able to tell that, yes, you're not just saying it, you're actually better at what
you look
doing.
For then? If you see a demo, what is really, if you were to give some guidance and someone now running their startups, want to know, how should they do the demo in the best way, or what should the business model that they're building be like? Or not be like?
I have approached.
Why the hell do we need another AI startup?
So the thing is, I've lived close to, I don't want to mention names, but I've lived with and close to entrepreneurs, and I almost became one myself. And I've been around entrepreneurs long enough to know that they all fall in love with their own ideas. So that's the first thing that I try to sort of pierce through, like, how true, whatever you're trying to sell here, how true is it? Or, I always ask, I do the same thing with humans whenever I meet people. Like, how comfortable are you with talking about your own weaknesses and like compare yourself to other people? And whenever I meet startups and I ask them, like, what about competitors? And like, what does the whole sort of field and competitor space look like? And when it's pretty common that they start saying, no, we don't have that many. There's this one in America, but it's blah, blah, blah. And no, we're one of a kind. And then you go home and I do my homework and I Google it or use ChatGPT, and it's pretty obvious that there are hundreds out there. Yeah. So that's a huge red flag for me.
Is it because they haven't done their homework, or is
because
it
they don't want to talk about it? I'm pretty sure. Okay. I know that they're aware, but I've met so many entrepreneurs who are like oblivious. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to take it in. They live in their own bubble. And
so a recommendation from you would rather be to, if someone were to do a demo or a pitch to you, they should be very open rather than trying to hide that there are competitors.
Yeah, I want to hear them talk about the risks and like, who could sort of bite you in the neck or ass tomorrow. Tomorrow. Like, and I want to hear them talk about it and be comfortable with it and still believe in their own idea enough to do it, to talk about both the good and the bad things. So that's one part. I mean, I haven't been 100%. I haven't been that successful in my. I haven't done that many angel investors investing.
Investments.
What? Investments.
Yes.
Yet, 2 of them have failed after 3 or 4 years. I must say I haven't really. I've invested in people and companies that I believe in, but I could have done smarter investments. And let me explain what I mean with that. I started out working at Stardoll. My first startup experience was Stardoll with Mattias Miksche back in 2009 or 10.
Was Daniel Ek still there then at that time?
He wasn't, but his aura, his reputation was definitely there.
Okay.
So back then he was, people were talking about the fact that he was building this music company, and his tech people were they were actually calling the tech people at Stardoll and trying to recruit them over. Like,
really?
No, nothing was forbidden at that time because the competition for the tech.
So for people that don't know, Daniel Ek was also one founder of Stardoll and also founder of Spotify.
And Mattias Miksche is one of those people who actually saw, especially tech competence really early in Daniel Ek and some other guys that eventually became really sort of successful in other big startups here in Sweden. So Lifesum, for example, Kry, some my colleagues at Stardoll they've been successful. Yes. And so if I would have been super calculated and smart, I would just have followed the money. I know that this guy is the best friend of this guy's because they worked at Stardoll, 5-10 years ago. And so they have each other's backs. And in that whole infrastructure and knowing it and knowing what the network looks like, I should have placed my money according to that knowledge and based on that knowledge, but I didn't. I chose to invest in people that are not that well known, that have other, deliberately people who are not those people that are established, who already have somebody's back or knows people at Sequoia or whatever.
Exactly.
And so it's more risky and it's harder. It's much harder because it's harder for them after angel investments, like the first round, to actually get the big sums and get the real support. Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people say, you invest in the people and perhaps not as much in the product or the tech, but and I guess it is simply safer, if you have people that have connections with other tech people and investors. Of course, it's a higher chance that they will make it.
And I'm not saying that they don't deserve it. I want to emphasize that, but it's easier. It is easier.
It's easier and it is safe. I mean, it's probably true. I mean, they will, with a higher probability, probably succeed simply because they have the connections, right? Yeah. It's a simple truth of life in some way. It's a bit unfair, but that's reality in some sense.
Exactly.
Right?
One of my classmates at KTH, he founded SoundCloud, and Alexander, together with a guy called Erik Walfors. And one of his brothers is now, or his brother, I don't know how many he has, is now the founder of one of the most spoken about, sort of invested in AI companies, and I think he's based in San Francisco now. And so again, knowing the ecosystem, knowing the people, investors, knowing them, the big ones, it definitely helps.
But thinking about other, people skills, one of course is the networking, and the connections they have, and that's a huge indicator and important one. But then you can also think about other traits of people, like the drive, the passion, their skills or whatnot.
Yeah.
How much do you look into that in any way? If you were a startup where completely unknown people in it, is it some? How would you judge? If the people potentially were good.
How they interact with each other, how they tell their story. If I can tell that they'll be good at sort of convincing other people, and especially if we're talking about AI, I don't just invest in AI startups, but if we talk about AI, it's all about like why they're using AI, obviously. So I would be more hesitant if it's somebody talking too much about sort of the tech AI aspect of it and sort of emphasizing just because they know that a lot of capital is flowing towards AI right now and using that too much. I want to hear them talk about the users and the people and understanding how you actually sort of build real value and solve real challenges. And back in the days, I was interested in sort of e-commerce and as well. Nowadays, it's mostly companies that try to build a better world, targeting climate change or education, making that better, making people's lives better. So for me, that's a really sort of heavy, important factor as well.
Cool. I just have to ask this question as well,
Yeah.
but there can be different role models when it comes to leadership and how different companies have some kind of CEO or person that is driving the company, and they have different mentalities and styles. Do you have any role models when it comes to the best CEO you ever met or seen? Or can you name someone that you think this is actually the perfect CEO that I can think
so
of?
the reason why I'm laughing is because I chose to start my own company because I had bad experiences of leadership. And I'm not angry, or maybe I am, but I also work mostly in startups where people were young and they had zero leadership experience. So, there's that. But I've seen people from a distance that really influence me. Helene Barnekow, of course, is one of them, ex-Microsoft, and she's just amazing in the way that she sometimes every now and then slides into my DMs and supports me in different things. And you can definitely tell that she cares about sort of the human in everything. And
right.
she's just very modern and progressive when it comes to trust-based leadership and the type of leadership that I would like to see more of.
I guess she's American, right? Still, and
is she? No, I think she's based in Sweden.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Because otherwise, there's usually a big difference between like Swedish and American type of leadership, and the trust-based approach is a bit stronger in Sweden, I would say, assume, right?
And just skipping the hierarchies. Yes. And letting people work from home, and you're not being measured as much as in the US. So she's definitely the one that comes to mind instantly.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Cool. I see the time is flying away here, so I'm going to skip some topics here. But you're very interested in design, right? And more creative
as well.
Aspects,
yeah.
Right? And that's also a bit controversial when it comes to AI, of course. And but how can you, if you take more creative professions, perhaps fashion, as you mentioned, is one interest of yours. How do you see that change going forward because of AI?
A friend of mine who's also very philosophical, and I love to have conversations with him, Arash Gilan. He has written a book called I Love AI. He recently wrote this article in Resumé or Krönika, like an op-ed in Resumé about the fact that AI doesn't reduce creativity; it shows us if we have any. And I think it's spot on.
Nice.
I think everything with AI and why it's so uncomfortable for many of us, not just creativity-wise, but other aspects as well, is because it's a mirror, and we have to face ourselves, and not everyone can do that. I usually take this as an example. I loved the film Den oändliga historien when I was a child. What is it called in English?
The Infinite History? I don't know.
Yeah, well, anyway, there's this guy who reads about, and also sort of is immersed in this other world where a character that sort of symbolizes him has to manage survive three different obstacles. And one is the last one, I think, and the hardest one is looking into a mirror and accepting what you see. And it's just not sort of your actual face. It's, everything that you are. So you see your whole life and what you stand for and how you treat other people. It just passes by. And that vision is something that, a lot of people can't take. And with AI, it's sort of the same thing. And what I try to emphasize is that this is a great opportunity to find our way back to creativity, because a lot of us have been forced to work like robots. We are the actual robots because we're measured, on performance, and we have to be databased, and we have to, it's and there's no space for innovation. There's no space for creativity, and now's our chance. And it was hard in the beginning, and it's still hard for me to understand when I use ChatGPT, like, how can I make this prompt more out of the box, like not just the most obvious one that I come to think of, but how can I expand it to get completely new answers? And that takes me...
It's more creative.
Exactly. And I have to accept the fact that I'm a beginner again. I'm not an expert. And I'm disappointed with how limited I seem to be. My brain is so limited. I want to be more creative, and I'm using AI as a tool for that. And there are so many sort of creative ideas that I have that I'm not able to, since I'm not a full-blown artist or musician, I can still have creative ideas, but I don't know how to actually shape them or make them real. And AI is a perfect tool for that. And
I mean, I can react to that. I wish I was a musician and I could sing. Like Goran is awesome at that, but I'm not.
Yeah.
And then when using AI tools like Suno or Udio and these kind of tools, and I can create a song with the lyrics, with the instruments and everything.
Yeah.
It makes me a bit happy.
Yeah.
But you can also see the negative aspects of that.
The copyright aspects are complex.
Yes.
And we definitely need to talk about it too. And I'm sure we're seeing a lot of sort of legal processes being initiated now. And yeah, we're just in the beginning of trying to figure out how we should tackle these things, because I definitely think that AI companies cannot use fair use and sort of we're just training our AI models as an excuse anymore. There's this whole sort of in-between regulation in between that we haven't thought about before in the pre-AI era that needs to be taken into account now, and new laws that have to be shaped.
Yeah. So talking about fair use, and if we take even software engineering or let's take music.
Yeah.
You could argue that any human that creates a new song, of course, have listened to other songs and been strongly inspired by it, and sometimes even very overlapping or even duplicates songs. But they don't get sued for it unless it's exactly the same. But still, all humans are inspired by other songs when doing a new song. But then an AI can do that, I guess, at a scale that is significantly higher than any human. And would that then make it not legal to have AI, listening to all songs and then creating a new one that haven't been seen before? I mean, is that not okay, you think? Should AI not be allowed to be?
That's the whole discussion, I guess. And there are lawsuits when it comes to human sort of, I mean, after every Eurovision Song Contest, there's always a lawsuit. Like, this song sounds exactly like this one. Yeah. And I compare them and I agree. Like, it sounds like, you copied the song and changed a couple of words, but the regulation, the laws have been designed to be very liberal. Like, you rarely see a case where somebody is, what do you call it? Doomed, convicted for it. And so I guess that's what we're going for too. We want to be liberal and accepting when it comes to AI generated content as well. But I don't know. I don't know. I don't have the answer. Again, there are lawsuits happening, and
should it be some kind of, we have in Sweden Sting, what's it called? Stim, thank you. And at least, if you use the originals of some lyrics or some song, then those people get, reimbursed, with that. That's good, I guess. But when it's not as clear cut, that it's literally that, artist that's been based on, but it's just inspired by it. Some people are still trying to have some kind of attribution model where if it's very close to another author or musician, they should get reimbursed in some way. Yeah. Would that be a way forward, you think? Or?
And it's happening. I mean, what I would like to see happen is that we don't need the lawsuits, that the AI companies themselves are signing deals, and that's happening now. Actually signing deals with whether it's text or music or video, asking for approval first, because now they're making they're making money. They're still not profitable, most of them, but you know, it's somewhat like Spotify, because again, Daniel Ek, I mean, he downloaded a lot of songs illegally, and his whole approach was, I'll ask for approval afterwards. You know, when they contact me, I'll say, I'm sorry, can we make a deal? And this is sort of the same. You do it first, and then you ask for approval or find the right sort of setup for it to be profitable and sustainable. But yeah, it's hard.
It's hard, and it's also, if you take like in the movie business, and we spend huge amount of money today to do a feature movie. Yeah. Like millions of dollars or hundreds of millions in some cases. And if it becomes super easy to create a movie, which it's not yet, you know, on that level, of course, but if you look a couple of years ahead, you can imagine that anyone can create a movie that is, you know, the Terminator 10 or something. Wouldn't it be super hard? I mean, okay, let me phrase it like this. If you take like the patent kind of question, you know, if you didn't have patents, then, you know, no company could really do the R&D properly to come up with new inventions, because they don't get, you know, the money back. And can we really do the more like high quality movie productions if everyone can do it super simply in the future? I mean, will we lose basically the ability to do high production movies in the future because of AI?
Because it's so easy thanks to AI. I think the most challenging thing when you work, like me being some type of futurist trying to prepare for the future, is reminding people that we are so prone to look at the future with our current glasses, so to speak, and our current framework. And, you know, looking at that question, you have to consider the fact that our values will change too. Like, what actually, it might not be the fact that a movie looks expensive, like, whoa, this cost, you know, X, you know, billions of dollars to produce, and it's so impressive. Our values and what we think is impressive and worth paying for or experiencing will probably change completely when anyone can do one of those blockbuster, really impressive movies. But
just take, you're writing a book right now. Yeah. And I guess you're using AI to help you at least. But it could be imagined that in the future, anyone could do the book like you did, but it's personalized. And it has the exact same type of value that you provide now because of your human knowledge and expertise. But in the future, it could be simply that, you know, books are, you know, generated in real time with the needs and knowledge that exists at that time and for what that person needs. And it was super hard to do something like writing a book like you're doing right now. Yeah. Could you see that? Or?
Yes and no. I think my approach to it, of course, I would be super pissed if somebody just took the book and released it in a sort of similar, slightly adjusted version next week or the week after I release mine. I would take it personally, but I've already sort of, I think my sort of mindset has shifted already. I don't see the actual content of the book as the main sort of value that I contribute with. And the same goes with my newsletter. Like, sometimes I can be like, you know, can't you see how unique my newsletter is and the content? And it's, you know, I provide so much, and you get gift links to sort of important articles that are behind paywalls. And, you know, I offer so much. But when it comes down to it, what I use and what I focus on is what I contribute as a person. I build communities and relationships. So it's not the actual content in the book, and I'm not writing it with a protective mindset. Somebody will probably write something similar, or already has written something similar, and it's not about that. It's about me writing it and me maybe inviting people to wine and discuss the philosophical questions around AI tied to the book. And offering that community and understanding that we're human beings. And so I really appreciate the fact that my first job roles were sort of related to community building and understanding people and what really marketing, PR, product development, everything comes down to your relationship with customers and people. And that's what I do here as well. The actual sentences, the actual content, I hope that really helps people in their daily lives. But the most important part is what I build as a community, and that they appreciate getting that knowledge from me and choose me and probably somebody else as their source of insights. And does that make sense? I don't know.
Build trust in some way to the human or the person and the subject. And that creates the
it's not the book itself, but I don't know. At the same time, I totally understand that people get really offended by the fact that their art is being copied in various ways. And I definitely don't want to disrespect creators in any way, but I think our view of ownership and creativity and owning copyright and patents will have to change.
Wasn't it one of Elon Musk's wives, Grimes?
Which of them? Yeah, Grimes is the cool one.
I mean, she released a song, and then a lot of people did AI copies or clones of it. And she said, you're perfectly aligned. I will never sue you, but I want 50% of the revenue. And she got a lot of money from it. Perhaps that could be something like if someone gets inspired by your book, say, fine, but I want some kickback.
Yeah. No, and that's what I mean. Like, we have to rethink and reevaluate the models that we're using and living by. Awesome.
We're moving closer to the ending topics here, moving a bit more philosophical, but you also speak a bit about the human-centered approach to AI.
Yeah.
Can you just elaborate a bit more? What do you actually mean with a human-centric approach to AI?
I think we already touched on it, but if you want to talk sort of AI lingo, we talk a lot about, and I write about it in my book, of course, sort of explainable AI and human in the loop are two popular terms, buzzwords. So as AI models become more complex, and we don't even know, like, they might even advance human intelligence or the type of intelligence that we have, it's becoming increasingly complicated and hard for us to understand what's going on, the black box problem. So one way to develop responsible AI, of course, and the main way, I guess, the main discourse out there is to actually design systems so that they explain what's happening. So we're seeing that with the reasoning models that we have now. ChatGPT, but also sort of the Chinese models. And so reasoning models are actually usually explaining what they're doing step by step because they have the time to do it, because it takes a bit longer. And so that's one way of doing it, to help us understand what the AI system based its decisions on, and it's becoming even more important when we have agentic systems and sort of independent agentic systems. It has to be controllable and sort of we have to the methods for actually understanding what's going on in the agents. That's super important. And then human in the loop is actually also it's closely tied to design of AI systems, is that we make sure that we always keep us in the loop in everything that's happening. And it's both, there's several aspects to it. One is the control part, that we actually understand what's going on, but it's also important because we don't want to lose our capabilities and just brain rot, just trust AI systems and sort of lose our own cognitive abilities, basically, and our own intelligence. We have to stay focused and we have the sort of final sole responsibility for what the AI system does. So we have to keep up with everything that's happening, and so we have to keep our brains in the loop as well.
And I guess we as humans also want to be in control in different ways, and I think in some ways, if I collaborate with any other human, a lot of humans have so much more skills and intelligence and abilities than I do. But I can still operate with them. But in some cases, if I operate a company, I still want to have some kind of say in or trust in that the other people working for me that may be much smarter than me still is moving in a direction that I'm in control of in some sense.
So every now and then you get updates and you can say yes or no or something in between. And
and I guess also being aligned in some way with the values that either if you have as a company or even as a society in some way that AI is operating in.
And that's actually what it's called in the world of AI as well, the alignment problem.
Yes, exactly.
Both like on a larger level, like higher level ethically, agreeing on what does... Oh, I just did this Trump thing. I didn't mean to.
You're being
I'm a bit Italian here, Trumpish. Actually agreeing on what sort of developing AI for the sort of... what do you say? För mänsklighetens bästa.
Best of humanity.
Yeah, best of humanity. So that's one level, but also alignment when it comes to, the more detailed things in our AI systems.
But if we take a bad example of this, and I think we are working hard. All the reinforcement of human feedbacks are trying to align it, in a direction that we control in some way. But also, if you take Anthropic, they had this kind of paper recently where they were trying to understand how the model reasons internally, and they asked it, afterwards, can you please explain how you come to this conclusion? Or some kind of math problem that a sinus of some kind of value. And then it gave, when they asked it afterwards, how it actually got to the conclusion, it gave a perfectly reasonable answer. This is how like math textbook kind of example of how you come to that conclusion.
Yeah, but it wasn't the right one.
No, it was not at all how it actually reasoned inside. So the model knew when you asked it, please elaborate how you came to this conclusion or why you think this answer is correct. It said something else than it actually did.
Yep.
That's kind of scary, right?
Yeah, but that's what it does all the time. Like it gives you the answers that you want, and the whole sort of fundamental problem with hallucinating, that it wants to have the answers. So it's no, I know it's probably one of the most complicated things.
But I guess that's why I like so much what Anthropic is doing as well. They actually do look inside, and then they do compare it. And if we do get that knowledge, hopefully we can start to actually also see that it actually reasons inside as we would like it to do in some sense. So
exactly.
I think
and now they're investing in open source robots as well. So just like all the rest of the AI companies are investing in humanoid robots. I'm really glad to see. No, sorry. Actually, no, I'm wrong. It's actually Hugging Face investing in open source robots. Yeah.
I was thinking about asking the final question here, but I have to ask you, since you are a proponent of open source, and something we've been discussing here in the pod a lot as well. What do you think the future is? I mean, we can easily see that open source have pros and cons. A lot of pros, but
it's not for everyone because
Do you think AI should be completely open sourced? Even the frontier labs should be open sourcing all the models, or what's your thinking about how we should?
The naive answer would be yes, because if we want to develop a responsible, transparent AI, we need to be able to look into it. But even the most transparent models, for example, when DeepSeek was released and everyone went like, "Oh, it's open source, we can look into how it works," and has it been trained for open AIs? Models. You can't really look into all the details in it.
I mean, if we take something like, I like Jan LeCun, at Meta, and he's a very big proponent of open source and says, even if you think like cybersecurity kind of issues, and if you do release a model and it's being abused, it's better to have someone being able to experiment with it and do research on it so that you can figure out ways to safeguard it against it. But on the other hand, you can think of, it's so easy to abuse a model if you are. I mean, there are people that are really bad.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people that shouldn't, be allowed to have a gun, right? And you wouldn't allow like people, or if you have a 3-year-old kid, you wouldn't have your gun being placed in front of them, right? So in some sense, some things need to be protected sometimes.
Yeah.
And the more powerful it is, the more potentially protected it needs to be from being abused.
Yep.
can you see that for AI models as well, especially these super powerful, super big frontier models being developed, that it actually do need to be protected potentially, or should they still be open sourced?
I'm probably in between with this as well. Of course, some things have to be hidden and some things have to be protected. But I'm not convinced that the right things are being hidden for the right reasons, if you know what I mean. I'm pretty provoked by the fact that, again, Försäkringskassan, I can't remember what it's, you remember what it's called.
The Swedish
Insurance
agent,
yeah.
Something like that.
They're using an AI system, and they've been doing it for quite some time now.
Yeah.
Maybe, have you been involved in it?
No.
I better ask before I criticize.
No, it's fine. Go ahead.
And they're using it to flag potential sort of hoaxers, people who are trying to get support without actually. What is this? Vabba. So claim that claim that they're staying at home with a kid and need support for that, but they're not. So actually trying to trick the system. And Svenska Dagbladet, one of the major newspapers here in Sweden, together with an agency, did this wrote an article where they looked into this system and tried to get access to the AI system and the data to sort of see, because they had indications of the fact that that this system was highly sort of biased and used in maybe the wrong ways, and flagging people just based on the fact that they're women and people of non-Swedish heritage. And they couldn't, Försäkringskassan actually claimed, like, no, we can't let you look into our AI system because it's our secret tool. Like, it's a very important tool for us, and we don't want to reveal to just anyone how it works. So they actually had to use old data because there are agencies whose role it is to actually, my English when it comes to these like specific terms.
Which
tillsynsmyndighet, so the agency that's controlling Försäkringskassan, actually did look into their system many years ago, maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago. So they had something to use and look into and base their article on. Which showed, again, a lot of bias. And Försäkringskassan claims that, it's not really a problem because we always have educated human beings making the final decision and looking into, is this really a person who's trying to use us and use the system? But it's not that easy. It's we are biased as humans, and no matter how educated you are, it's so easy to trust an AI system, and it's hard to go against it if it says this person is probably trying to trick the system. There's this bias where you tend to, the more you use the system, you tend to lean back and trust it even more. And so actually using AI systems is playing with fire. And we have to make it possible for media or for tillsynsmyndigheter to look into what AI models we actually use and how they work. And that's why I lean towards more a long answer to your question, but lean towards more open systems. Yes, but I'm not 100% pro.
It's two different things. One thing is being able to look into a system, but another to be letting it go publicly, right?
Yeah, so that anyone can use it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tough
I know
questions.
it's a tough question. I don't have a clear answer to it. It's a great question. I'll have to come back in a year. Maybe I will have a more clear,
if you have an answer in
opinionated
1 year, I
answer.
will be super surprised. I don't think anyone will have it, but
Probably the answer is there is something, it lies somewhere in between.
It depends.
It depends.
It's a good answer.
Yeah.
Paulina?
Yep.
If we look really, really far ahead here and assume that at some point in time there will be an AGI system that is, as Sam Altman calls it, have a higher skill factor than an average coworker.
Yeah.
So he can basically perform even agentic tasks and whatnot, and being innovative and all of these things that AI systems cannot do today to the level that humans can. But still, imagine that will be a time where we'll have AGI. We we can imagine two different extreme scenarios, and I'd like to hear where you are on this scale. Either we are on the Max Tegmark kind of dystopian future where we have the Matrix and the Terminators and the machines are trying to kill us all. Or we can be on the other extreme, potentially saying that AI will, solve climate change and fix cancer, cure cancer, and fix energy crisis, and we potentially will have a world of abundance where Elon Musk usually calls it something like the cost of price and services will go towards zero, and we will have a world of abundance in some sense.
Yeah.
And I guess the truth is always in between somewhere. But where do you think we will end up? Do you have a thought about where? For one, if we start like this, do you have a timeline where potentially we could reach something that we could call AGI?
So the problem is that we don't even have a mutual sort of definition of AGI that we have agreed on. No. So we don't. We it's impossible to answer that question.
But if we take Sam Altman's one, saying an AI system that can operate to the performance that an average human coworker can.
In any task?
Yeah. Not for all tasks, but if someone is a coder, if someone is doing the books, financial books, if someone is doing marketing and whatnot, and just taking the average.
I know this is a super boring answer, but I hate timelines because nobody knows. Yeah. I already mentioned that I think that it's definitely possible that one of the AI companies, the tech companies, the big ones, Magnificent Seven, already have developed AGI to a certain extent. Could be possible.
Could be.
I'm more leaning, no, I don't know. Again, with AI, it could happen at any time with us actually being able to foresee it. There are so many things happening within AI that I feel like I should have seen this coming. My work is being a futurist. I had one job, and that's predicting things, and I still couldn't predict generative AI. And I even found old slides where I have sort of generative AI, really early images generated with AI, and I didn't know what it was. And I didn't do my job. I didn't look into the research from Google, for example.
Who can predict the future?
No. So I think, I will be really bad at predicting AGI as well.
50 years or 5 years?
No, more 5-10 years more 10 years than 50, for sure. And what will the world look like? So the boring, most obvious answer that I think you already know, is something in between or both. But I want to emphasize, and in wrapping this discussion up and sort of tying in knots, or whatever we call it, I want to emphasize the fact that we can still control where it takes us, what we make of AI. You and I, anyone can decide, and we're not just, hopefully not just fools or puppets, even though I totally understand that it definitely feels that way sometimes, and even I feel that. We can, there's this agency thing, like we can definitely make use of that, use our agency in things.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't, I don't know who said it, but a famous quote is basically the best way to predict the future is to build it.
Exactly.
And if we keep in control of what AI should do, perhaps we can.
One thing that I'm prepared to actually predict or not predict is Sam Altman, back in the days, he actually imagined a future where AI would be so productive and helpful that we would all just smoke a joint on like a mountaintop somewhere. And, I don't know if that's your definition of abundance, a life of abundance. It's not mine. Yeah. I don't think that will happen. I think one thing that we have to think about, consider, and regulate as well is what we do with the extra time that we get. Yeah. I think we're so prone and trained, and the economic models are forcing us to be productive all the time, even more productive. Mm. So we will definitely fill that time with more jobs, more work, more of everything, and not necessarily focus on leisure time or smoking a joint or whatever you're doing. And that's a bit sad. That's definitely something that I think we should try to shape as well. You know, make sure that this actually contributes to a life that is better for us and makes us feel better about things and have more time for things and our children. And
Nick Bostrom wrote a book recently called Deep Utopia, and he looks more on the positive side, you know, and what can happen if everything goes really well. And he talked also about, you know, what happens if people don't have jobs, you know, and he said, you know what, today we have a lot of people that don't have jobs.
Yeah.
We have children. Are they sad and depressed? No, right? We have retired people. Are they depressed? No, some perhaps, but most not. Yeah. So humans are really adaptable. And
yes. But the premise there is that these people who are not depressed, not having jobs, is because they're not expected to have jobs. So the problem is expectation, and the system, you know, the system is built around the notion of being nyttig. Är du nyttig lilla vän in Swedish? So like, are you productive? Are you actually creating value in society? And it's embedded in the walls. It's everywhere in society. We're expected to be useful, to be valuable, and to.
But if we think that, you know, we will have food on our table, we'll have roof on top of our heads. You know, actually, we already do today to a large extent. But then you have thoughts like the universal basic income as a way to just distribute wealth in some way, so people that don't want to work perhaps still can, you know, live.
I know.
Yeah,
but it's more complicated than that. And again, it's about sort of what is expected of us, because a friend of mine, Siri Helle, she wrote this great article about sort of the government, again, not preparing enough for what's coming when it comes to sort of people being unemployed, depressed, etc. I do believe that we will see new jobs coming, but there's definitely this phase in between where people will not have jobs, and people have missed the train, the AI train, and are not updated and are completely outdated. And what we see in history, like in the 90s, where the industry in Sweden was struggling and a lot of people were sort of in that digital transformation, were losing jobs. They were masses of people depressed, långtidsarbetslösa, like, you know, it when it becomes a lifestyle, even though you don't want it to, you haven't chosen it, and you become depressed and you become ill, it costs a lot for society. And so that's a huge problem. Unless we manage to change the expectations, like, it's okay. Maybe base income is one way of communicating that, like, we don't expect you to be useful all the time. It's okay. You can, you know, do whatever you want to during these hours. You know, you're worthy, regardless.
Right, and I guess, you know, I think one thing I hope you agree with: AI will cause a lot of change. Yeah, and it will be a big transition for a lot of people and companies and society in coming years. Who knows how long time, but it will be a big transition, and usually change is hard. Yeah. So at least during this time, it will be a lot of discomfort, a lot of people that are getting
a lot.
Right.
Yes, and that's why it's so much easier to say no. It didn't know my name when I used ChatGPT to Google me. So it's, you know, it's bogus. It's much easier to hide behind that.
You feel safe. Paulina Modlitba.
Yeah.
It was an honor to have you here. So many amazing topics and great discussions. I hope you can stay for a bit more off-camera after work discussions as well, going even more philosophical and other topics. But thank you so much for coming here. It's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure for me too. Thank you.